Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Justin Thomas, and we are here to wrap up our spring football Roundup series. We have two more districts to talk about, including our last in 5A, so let's get cracking. Justin, let's talk District 4-5A, Division 1. This is, as a quick refresher, this is the district that has the three Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD schools, so Creekview, Newman Smith, and R.L. Turner, plus Birdville, Colleyville Heritage, Denton Ryan, and Grapevine. A district that, now that the school year's done, we can look back and say that, realignment was a good thing for Carrollton-Farmers Branch in some sports. You look at what happened with the, some of the volleyball programs or soccer and R.L. Turner baseball in the year that they had and whatnot. So realignment wasn't a total, just feed them to the wolves sort of outcome for CFB ISD. Football, though, on the other hand, was they took their lumps on the football field last year, no doubt. And
this was a beast of a football district.
Oh yeah, one that you just immediately looked at upon realignment and like, crap.
Yeah.
They're just not going to have. There's just not going to be a whole lot of just truly winnable games with some of these programs. Just juggernauts like Ryan and Heritage.
Ryan made state semis. Birdville made the fourth round and lost to Ryan. Grapevine made the third round and lost to Birdville. So they
just beat up on each other.
Playoffs and then eliminating each other in the playoffs until Denton Ryan ran into Highland Park.
One of the, just as far as those top four goes, definitely one of the best districts in that region. So just
and then you look at Denton Ryan. They have the co-MVPs coming back, and Billy Bowman and Drew Sanders. They had the offensive MVP, Amani Bailey, coming back. They have the defensive MVP, Trey Smith, coming back. Oh, and they also had the offensive and defensive newcomers of the year in the district, too. So they'll be coming back also. So I think Denton Ryan's going to be pretty good again.
Yeah, it would appear to be the case. Another year that's probably, I don't know how much is going to change relative to those at least top four in the district last year, but we're going to focus on the three Carrollton schools and just kind of catch you all up on just what they have going on at this juncture of the offseason. Let's start with Newman Smith, I guess the de facto city champ.
Yeah, the city champ.
From CFB ISD. Justin, what is the read on the Trojans who tied as part of a three-way tie for fifth place last year in the district?
And you said the city champ. They beat Turner 41-7 and then finished off the season beating Creekview 21-18 to get that championship. So 3-7 overall record. They're going to have to do some retooling. They lose, a couple second-team all-district players, quarterback Dane McMahon and running back Jacoby Johnson. So they're going to have to retool in the backfield. But looking at Smith, I think this is a team. Paul Aressa, they're going to hang their hat on their defense, and in particular their front seven. Brandon Stiegel was one of their three all-district players who is returning at linebacker. Damian Alston there at linebackers, primed for a good year. And then the defensive front should be pretty strong behind Jeremiah Brown, Andrell Edwards, and Cameron Taylor. So I think that's going to be kind of the strength of Newman Smith will be the front seven defensively there. And then you'll see how some guys like Sanjay Jones, Blake Austin fill into roles in the secondary there.
Okay. So they went 2-5 in district last year, tied with rival Creekview and in Denton High School. Creekview was able to get that second district win over Denton to pull even in that three-way tie for fifth place. So with the Mustang, it's just kind of
real quick, just to finish up on Smith. I just want to mention, I think you're going to see junior Doug Hill get the quarterback's slot.
Okay.
So they'll be a little young and inexperienced there, but he should have some pretty good weapons there. And Marshall Funches, who was an all-district receiver last year, and also Corey Wyatt, he was also all-district. I think you might see him playing a little bit more running back this year to replace Johnson. But some good weapons there for Doug Hill if that's who emerges this fall as the starter under center.
A couple all-district picks at the skill positions for Newman Smith. So with Creekview, just what is kind of the read right now on the Mustangs? A very very run-heavy look for the Mustangs last season.
Yeah, they got off to a really tough start, but finished strong. They beat Turner, then they beat Denton 30-13 pretty convincingly. They had the chance to finish on a 3-game win streak if they could have pulled out that Smith game, but came up a little short. you mentioned run heavy, and they should be a pretty good running team again, because they're kind of their strength coming back is all on the line. When you look at guard Jack Parker, he was a first teamer. Noah Wirtz was a second teamer tackle, and then Isaiah Pena, who's a kind of a tight end H-back, and he was actually their second leading rusher behind their quarterback Donovan Bakari. He had 90 carries, 499 yards, and 5 touchdowns. They're going to hand it off to a bunch of different people. I think maybe something like 12 people carried the ball last year or something. So
Goodness.
They had a lot of touches. It goes with their quarterbacks and their triple option. So Bakar's gone. Brett Esch did see some time at quarterback last year. He was 21 of 37, 284 yards, a touchdown and 2 interceptions, and he also ran for 280 yards and a score. So.
And in a run-heavy offense like that, I mean, those are at least
you're not expecting
pretty consistent reps.
Eye-popping numbers in the passing game from the quarterback anyway. But Bakar was kind of more of a playmaker, so it's going to be tough for them to replace them. But you kind of got to like what they got in the line and at running back. They lose their top 3 receivers, but kind of, as you mentioned, not something they really lean on anyway. No. So defensively, Aaron Cyrus and Blaze Ramirez are back. So I know, talking to Coach Klein last year, he was really impressed with what he saw from Blaze at the inside linebacker spot, so he's going to kind of quarterback the defense there.
Sure he wasn't just awestruck by that first name of his?
Maybe he was, but he plays with a Blaze as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So they have Aaron Cyrus back at cornerback. They do have to replace Janarian Beasley. I believe he's at the Colony now. I've seen him in some 7-on-7 Twitter pictures, so I think he transferred over to the Colony, so that's another tough loss for the secondary there. But so we'll see if they can kind of build on what how they finished last year, finishing pretty strong, almost on that 3-game win streak.
And then R.L. Turner, we were talking earlier, it wasn't just just a few years ago or whatever that R.L. Turner looked to be making a bit of a comeback. I believe they had a season which they won like 6 games or something like that. I mean, just but nevertheless, the Lions took some lumps last year in their first year under Isaiah Young.
Yeah, when Michael Ramirez kind of led that resurgence and then took a AD role with CFB. So Coach Young came in last year, his first year, to replace him, and it didn't go too well. They went 0-9. They had a game canceled, which might have been the game they had the best chance of winning. But 0-9, their closest margin of victory was 23-7. They weren't very competitive in district, and they need to find a way to get the offense going, because they didn't have any game where they had more than 1 scoring drive last year. So tough to win if you're only scoring once a game.
That's a surprising statistic.
Yeah. Damian Saldana is kind of their best returner. He was an all-district player at tight end. He had 9 catches for 130 yards. They have two players they worked at quarterback last year, and both are back. So at least they have some experience there, but they'll need to kind of minimize their mistakes. Low completion percentages, more touchdown or interceptions and touchdowns, I guess, as you would expect. We're talking about Sergio Santiago and Connor Holtman there. So they both were juniors last year. They'll both be back this year. So it'll be interesting to see if they're still kind of splitting the duty, or if somebody kind of emerges as the go-ahead guy there.
And then, you always know that just like the second off season under a new head coach can always, I guess, more just having the continuity and more of an understanding as far as kind of the expectations and where your program is at. So who knows ultimately what it'll mean for Turner.
Last year, Coach Young came in pretty late. I want to say he was hired kind of mid to late May, so he didn't get much of the off season with them at all there.
And that can definitely, pay its dividends when you think of just like that, not getting much of a spring under your belt, and then you go into the, to those fall practices and you're having to get caught up on so much, especially if he was, installing any new schemes and whatnot. And it can definitely not put you in the best of situations heading into the season, especially in a district like that where just the margin for error is so slim. So yes, maybe a full off season will, at the very least, maybe get that error pointing back up for the Lions next season. And that's just a look at kind of where things are at for Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD. Again, and what should be a pretty tough district all around. Once again, if the
even if they make the strides kind of they're expecting, it's still going to be tough to crack the top 4 in that district. Yeah,
with Heritage, Birdville, Grapevine, and Denver High, and all seemingly in good spots to repeat as playoff qualifiers out of that district. And that is a look at, the last of our 5A districts as part of our spring football roundup series. Got one more 6A district on the docket, and that is big old District 9-6A. So we will do a quick line change and pick that up after a word from the sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we have reached the finish line. We are here to talk about the last district in our spring football roundup series. We have Taylor Ragland and Kendrick Johnson to help discuss District 9-6A. Allen, Plano ISD, McKinney ISD, Prosper, Jesuit, one of the biggest districts that we cover. So let's get rolling. A district that I think, at the very least, as far as at this present moment in time, what is today, June 10th, this present moment in time and where these teams are at, a district that could have a bit of a different look to it next year, after a year where we had the top four of Allen, Plano East, Prosper, McKinney. I feel like at least one of those teams for sure has had a different outlook since we last spoke of them. Plano East, Taylor, what do you even make of Plano East right now?
Speechless.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, basically, it's going to be it's going to be a completely different team identity-wise, and I mean not just on offense, the entire team. Because you look at their returners, and head coach Joey McCullough has already basically said that the leader and the captain, the kind of the spearhead of this team is going to be Kayvon Hamilton on defense, on the defensive line, and the defense as a whole is going to have to be, I think, the identity of the team and really kind of the thing that drives the bus, because they don't bring back anything on offense.
Sound like 2 years ago when Hines left, how that team was, like they had the youngsters that were seniors last year, remember them?
Yeah.
They didn't develop as good as everybody thought they were as when they were juniors, and they put all that pressure on the defense, and they couldn't take all that pressure.
I think the defense will be okay, but I mean, there are so many questions on offense, because the only skill position returner coming back is Trey Jones-Scott.
That's a good one.
He's a good one. He's a great athlete. He ran for, the numbers are a little
very fast,
a little misleading, because I think he ran for 800 or 900 yards, which on the surface doesn't seem like blowing it out of the water and having an incredible year, but he wasn't featured the way that he will be this year.
Pass-happy offense.
Yeah, I mean, he got his fair share of carries, a lot of play action stuff, that kind of stuff. But this year they're really going to ask him to be the bell cow and to carry the load on offense. Like I said, he's the only person coming back. They lose Brandon Mallory under center. They lose every receiver essentially. I mean, they bring back almost nothing. And I know that it's easy for McCullough to be optimistic now and talk about the talent coming up. The JV team, I think, was unbeaten last year. Had a really good season, so there is talent.
It's just unproven.
And there's something to be said for expectations and having a year like they did last year and winning 8 games for I think the first time in more than a decade. So there's definitely a trajectory there and some expectations that have been set out. But man, it's going to be a completely different team, a completely different feeling team, I think, and obviously the quarterback position and the receiver position, because sometimes you see schools where at Plano West they're still pretty uncertain with their quarterback. They're a little uncertain outside, but they have some pieces coming back. Both of those groups, they don't know who's going to be under center at East. They have a transfer coming in. I think Ryan Faust got next to no playing time last year, but he's in the mix. And then they don't bring back any wide receivers. It's not one or the other. It's not like you can have a new quarterback throwing to some established receivers or some new receivers with a Brandon Mallory. You lost it all. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Here's a question, because Matt would know this, because he knows everybody at Prosper. Does Prosper have a quarterback?
Prosper does, yeah.
Yep.
Like, who other than, and you can't really count Seth Cox from McKinney, because he really didn't play exclusively.
Right.
He filled in. Who's quarterback? That's going to be a difference, because Boyd has no idea. Jack Hagan may even play quarterback.
Really?
He may get in the mix. And then Seth Cox for McKinney, Plano East got a new one. Plano's going to get a new one. And Allen's got a new one. So that's going to quarterback.
The only thing else,
only one, right? Got the kid from Jesuit to come back.
Okay, but he's actually, I believe he's at Capel.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, Kevin Schumann, because I was out covering 7-on-7 last week, and I was watching Capel though, and Justin Thomas kind of told me a few names to look out for there, and I went back and told him hey, I don't recall seeing this kid on their roster last year. Showed him a picture of their quarterback, and their coach confirmed that it was Kevin Schumann. Wait a minute, that name sounds familiar, and yeah, sure enough, it was the Jesuit quarterback from last year. So yeah, I believe he's at Capel now. So Plano West is, I guess, one of the only teams that could theoretically have.
In theory, because Danny Davis and Will Cannon are both back, and they split time last year with Danny Davis starting more often than not, and saw a lot of time under center. But even bringing a new head coach and Tyler Sukup in, he's basically started from square one. It could be Danny Davis. He could emerge as the best option, but he's having a completely new, completely fresh competition essentially. Because
I will say this: McKinney did it last year. they had a bunch of they still have guys I still don't know on the roster, and they found a way to do it. So it can be done.
Yeah, we say in theory, just because there was a changing of the guard there at head coach at Plano West, so not necessarily who was in their position from last year. That not a guarantee that'll carry over. Plano West was one of 2 programs that had a change in head coach, and this was low key such a fascinating subplot in the offseason as far as how McKinney Boyd was going to fill its coaching opening and how Plano West was going to fill its. And with Boyd,
they got a great hire.
They did. That is to Lord Joe McBride, who had a very successful run at Capel, not too long ago as head coach.
You could get without getting the state championship.
He was he was their athletic director for a bit, but they were able to lure him back into the coaching ranks. So what has been the read right now on how Coach McBride has Boyd coming along?
They're definitely going to be a lot different. It's I went to the spring game. The lines is going to be the key. They're trying to get bigger, more athletic up front because kind of like he was saying with Trey Jones Scott, they're going to feature Tyler Shaw. He barely got he didn't even start with 2 games that had 780 yards and 10 touchdowns. So this year he's going to get the ball 20 times a game, maybe more than that. So he's definitely going to be the bell cow, but we're going to have the line to be able to give him the holes and keep him healthy. First, somebody missed a block on the first player in the spring game. He had a nicked up ankle, something you can't have in the regular season. And I have no idea who's going to be the quarterback. I don't even want to put out names. That's how much I don't know. On the perimeter, they have decent talent. Kareem Coleman is a guy that's a playmaker that has to get consistent with the hands. But once he do catch the ball, he's probably one of the top 3 fastest kids in the district, I'd say, hands down. And he can make plays in the special team. Defense, it's going to be different. It's going to be a new scheme. I don't even know what kind of scheme they run. So everything's going to be straight scratch. So, it's going to, the defense has potential. They got Bianchi and them back in the safeties. He'll be a sophomore next year, but I don't really know what they're running and what they're expecting. So if we say wild card, that's you can put the Bronco logo and you put wild card. I have no idea what to expect from them.
So how does it compare relative to McKinney, which enters its second offseason under Marcus Shaverson, one of the better turnaround jobs last season, at least as far as how the program began the year and how they finished?
The goal is to not only get the playoffs but to win a game. They're expecting to go to at least the area round. That's the expectation. It's not we hope we're gonna fall in there. And they got year 2. It's like everybody know what to expect because a lot of people like as Coach Shavers like to say, line football ain't for everybody. So a lot of people got the memo, and they have a lot of talented guys, but they don't have experience. Like Seth Cox, the offensive coordinator, is very high on him. He has potential. He has the look. He's like 6'3", 6'4", drop back quarterback, gonna be able to make some plays. And then they got an Adrian Shepard who has a chance to be the bell cow, but right now they got a stable. But McKinney always finds somebody. Yeah. If you look through the record books, they've gone maybe no more than 2 years without a 1,000-yard back. In the last 2 years, you had Gaddick with 2003, and you had Cordrick Dunn last year with 1,005. So the standard is high to replace those big shoes. And they got a guy named Isaiah Wallace, who's a guy. It's kind of like he's a slot guy, kind of like a NFL Landry, and for the Browns.
Jarvis Landry?
Yeah, he's got that potential, but I think they're going to find ways to get him the ball because he's a playmaker. And on defense, it got Mitchell Tyler. And year 2, that scheme, because McKinney's defense got better as the year went on. So I'm very interested to see what they're going to do because last year they weren't as aggressive because they didn't want to get people confused. It's kind of like the Cowboys back in the day. Just line up, don't mess up. So they advanced from that, and they got a lot of talent on that defense. So I'm still waiting, but I think the Lions are going to be
pretty.
We
might drop down.
I think the Lions are going to be pretty legit to be able to get back in that playoffs. And I do not expect the 0-5 start.
Mitchell Tyler, he just committed to Baylor recently, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
When do you think the last time is that McKinney High School produced like a Big 12 product? I was thinking back when I was reading over your story about that, and it feels like it's been a while since they've had it.
That's not my 3 years.
They have guys who go to college and play and whatnot, but as far as like a Big 12 guy, that seems like
he's very rangy.
Rarity.
He's a guy that has for coach talk, he has a high motor, but he's always around the ball. So you want that guy that's always around the ball.
You mentioned just McKinney and their tradition at the running back position. It's kind of a similar plight that Plano faces this season as they.
My man Cumbie, that's my guy.
You want a good Cumbie stat, Kendrick? I
thought it was with the 8.6 yards.
Yeah, sorry. So I posted this on Twitter. I went back through just because we've talked for years about just what a big play threat Kyron Cumbie is. So just to put a historical context to it, I went back through and checked out what Kyron Cumbie's yards per carry over his entire varsity career was, and compared that to the other 2 kind of bell cow running backs, during this this century of Plano Senior High School football, that being Rex Burkhead, Super Bowl champion, New England Patriot, and Brandon Stevens. Rex Burkhead, for his career at Plano, averaged 6.1 yards per carry. Really good. Brandon Stevens, 6.2. Kyron Cumby, 8.6.
And didn't get the ball 20 times.
And that is now the big question mark, is how does Plano go about replacing his production?
Who's the sophomore? The kid, I saw him last year. He jumped out on me.
Oh yeah.
He's a different type back, but he's got talent.
Tylen Hines is who you're thinking of. Yeah. Yes, Tylen Hines will be kind of the heir apparent, so to speak, as far as the. I mean, because that's like we talked about last year. Like, he was in some ways very Cumby-esque in his ability to literally turn any carry, any reception into a touchdown.
A lot bigger though.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's going to be a junior, so they'll have him for 2 more years, and him and Cody Christ are kind of be the 1-2 punch there in the backfield. I think that their situation in the backfield itself should be all right. Now they do have some names up front that they got to replace from last year, so that
line last year was very underrated.
Yeah, has to be taken into consideration. Where I'm curious is how they're going to approximate Cumby's contributions as a slot receiver, because that was one offensive wrinkle that Plano kind of showcased last year out of the blue, was taking those running backs and using them not just in the backfield but as slot receivers, and that was an area where Cumby really shined.
Because he got the mismatch of beating, but you can't if you miss him out the jam.
Because he's a really good route runner, has really good hands. It's not like, even though that was his secondary position, it's not insane to think that he might have been one of the best inside receivers in the entire district. And I mean, he was so valuable in converting 3rd and long just because he's so freaking quick. He could get separation against anybody.
They ran it one time against Boyd. It was 3rd and 22. He got 21 yards without making a move. He's waiting for his blocks and just accelerate.
Yeah. So now, without that, I think that Hines and Christ will be able to at least keep the running game afloat strictly out of the backfield, because they are still planning on doing, if one is in the backfield, another might be in the slot. And another name that I haven't mentioned is C.J. Perry, a guy who also had a really productive spring, per head coach Jadon McCullough. So I'm anxious to see just kind of how that receiving game is going to evolve without Cumby, and if Hines, Christ, Perry, either of them are able to replicate what Cumby was able to do out of the slot, because that was such a useful weapon for them last year and such a valued part of their offense. So you have that, and then this is also the first time since 2013 that Plano is going to begin the year with a junior as a quarterback, or a non-senior for that matter.
How long since
2013?
Mitchell
Hansen.
They've had one and done for the last 5 years.
Mitchell Hansen, 2nd round MLB draft pick from way back. Yeah, he's it'll be Oliver Towns who takes the reins, this spring, and he's a guy who saw some meaningful reps last year. It wasn't just garbage time minutes that he got. He was in there, in competitive games, in place of Cole Winnett at times. So
he played really well against East.
Yeah.
That game that I saw, that's that game that kind of shocked all of us. I thought he played really well.
Some flashes of brilliance last year for sure. So that does help, at least getting a little bit more continuity at the quarterback position than they've had in years past. I think on paper, if nothing else, just because East lost so much and West is just kind of who knows.
West is such a question mark.
Can Plano beat McKinney? McKinney's got their number.
They do, man.
And now McKinney's got more talent, so it's I don't see that for some reason that's been a swing game in the district, because the winner of that game got the 4th spot.
Yep, it's you wouldn't think that. You know what to expect whenever Plano ISD lines up across from Allen, but it would be weird that now that it's McKinney High, McKinney High's now won.
Last district, if it wasn't for the Plano East, they blew up in the second half. They would have swept them 2 years in a row after never sweeping them.
Weird, because McKinney last year was in the optics look weird because McKinney was 0-5 when they beat Plano. That McKinney team went on to make the playoffs, so it doesn't look as bad in hindsight, but I don't know. It still feels like that. I feel like every year we get to that game and you know what? Plano should take care of business. This is the year. And then, for whatever reason, man, McKinney has been a thorn in their side. So to answer your question, I don't know. History says no, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how these teams are looking in September or October, whenever that
because I know y'all cover PhD schools. It's very clear that whoever's the best out of McKinney, who's the best in Plano, will go head to head for probably the last 2 spots.
Yeah, it feels like that's kind of been the case.
This year it could be the 2nd or 3rd.
Feels like that's been the way it's worked out in recent years. Yeah. So we already talked Plano West, at least in some detail when we were doing our spring football primer series or whatnot. Has there been anything new that's kind of surfaced since then, or
not
I don't
really.
Want to just rehash,
because
even at, talked about.
Even at 7-on-7, they ran out Davis, Cannon, Wyatt Johnson, Andrew Pico, I think at least. So 4 quarterbacks. So it's going to be wide open. I think, as I mentioned in that other podcast, Sukup's really just concerned about the culture first. As much of a buzzword as that is, that's truly his number one concern. He wants to implement a different attitude and a different approach and a different work ethic that he wanted to bring to the program. And he's so, I think, hyper concerned about all of that the actual skill position battles and stuff are going to have to wait until August when practice really heats up and all that kind of stuff. But there is some talent. I mean, from the spring game, Tavarius Garland, that dude's a big guy. He's athletic. Cole Carter's athletic. There's plenty of guys. Greg Drawn, who saw a little bit of action but was hurt, more often than not last year, it seemed like. But yeah, I mean, not a whole lot new outside of just continuing to kind of get some action under center from all those different guys at 7-on-7. But it's going to be a process. If
you put any stock into the order in which the quarterbacks are used in 7-on-7, which those are just the little things between the lines you kind of look at to see which way a team might be leaning as far as who might be ahead in the quarterback battle. It was Danny Davis, who was the first quarterback on the field in the one game that I saw. So who knows? It's an incredibly small sample size, but just putting that out there.
I mean, he is the one with the most.
Game this year. That's the real question.
Man,
how about just a game?
I think that's where I'm at. I think that's where I'm at. I don't envision 0-10. I don't.
I hope not.
It could happen.
No program deserves that.
It could absolutely happen. You look at their schedule; it's the same schedule they played last year. So I mean, it's not.
Good luck with all that.
I mean, it could happen, but I don't envision that. I think that they will sneak up on at least. They'll sneak up on somebody this year.
They almost did it to McKinney last year.
Yeah.
They almost took down McKinney last year.
Yeah. And I mean, the way those Plano ISD games go, I mean, who knows? I mean, you saw that. Who would have thought that Plano was just going to completely roll Plano East last year? I mean, it happens. Plano's a much better team than West might be this fall. But, crazy things happen in those. It's high school football still. You have no idea.
Who haven't we talked about yet? Let's see. Allen. We already mentioned Allen a little bit.
What about Allen and everybody else, though?
Yeah. I'm anxious to see how much that theory holds true this year, just because I don't want to rehash the same stuff that I talked about from our last spring football primer podcast, but this is going to be a very different Allen team, much more inexperienced than in years past, including up front, where they're going to be replacing their entire offensive line and their entire defensive line. Two plights that very rarely do those same things happen in the same offseason.
Well, that's their MO too. That's where they beat you.
That's where it all starts for Allen. For all the star power that they've had at quarterback over the years, that offensive line has been. Just look at the NFL draft with Bobby Evans and Greg Little getting picked, and then they just sent they had a 4 or 5 star prospect, and EJ and Doma Ogar is going off to Oklahoma. JD Walton got drafted a ways back. The Allen offensive line is just a perennial, just juggernaut unit.
Don't they put backup since they've been up so many points that the backups basically get a lot of PT. So these guys have already had quality playing time that are playing. They were full-time starters.
No, that's a fair point too. Just because they're up 5 touchdowns or so midway through the third quarter, and then for the last quarter and a half, they start cycling in the backups. So they do have kids that have gotten reps. Now, granted, it's kind of the same situation as in Raylan Sharp, the quarterback, where you're going up against either backups or tired first team defenses and whatnot. So it's not entirely the same thing. As far as some names that are kind of in the mix for the offensive line, you have guys like Josiah Nicholas, Colton Ellert, who was an injury fill-in last year deep in the playoff run. Allen had some injuries on the offensive line. He was one of the guys that had to step up in the the Duncanville game, for example. So that's you want a baptism by fire. How about an offensive lineman getting your first one of your first serious varsity action against Duncanville in that D line?
That D line's probably one of the best I've seen because I went to the state championship game. There's a kid that's on the North Shore line that's going to Alabama. He had all kinds of fits that day. So that's how good that team is.
That was a historically great defense, and Allen almost pulled it off. Allen almost took him down, had as much success against them as any team in the state did. Getting back to their offensive line, man, that mic is giving you all sorts of trouble, Kendrick. Eddie Kao, Tanner Norris, Jackson Newville, who's a name that I recognize from John Paul II. He was a transfer from there, had an all-district campaign as a freshman for John Paul last year. And then in the defensive line, guys like Lane Lewis, Cole Latos, who was a standout power hitter for the baseball team, team, Cyrus McDougal, Michael Owen-Zurike, who I believe had an older brother named Levi, who was the 9-6A Defensive Player of the Year just a few years ago, currently tearing it up at Washington. And then they've also moved their an all-district first-team selection at tight end, Elijah Fisher. He's now playing on the defensive line as well, so they're having to kind of switch things up to try to find the best mix of personnel. I feel like the defensive line might at least, in theory, be in better shape as far as which unit could potentially approximate what it had last year, just because you mentioned kind of the depth that these units have. And the defensive line, it doesn't matter whether it's garbage time or not, like they rotate their defensive line so frequently. So you had guys like Cole Latos and Michael Owen-Zurike who played at least 275 snaps last season. So despite being backups, they got plenty of run last year, and meaningful run too. So that experience might be a little bit tougher to draw from on the O-line. Again, like I said, you're referring to guys that mostly saw a lot of time in garbage time and whatnot. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, Allen is going to be brand new in a lot of capacities, and the offensive and defensive lines are right at the forefront of a new look for Allen next season.
Do they go undefeated 10 years in a row in district?
In district? At some point, even despite all that, like, A, you have to ask the question, like, they kind of get the benefit of the doubt, and B, like, who do you really see sneaking up on them at this point?
I don't see any. I mean,
has somebody on this district, now granted, like you said, surprises and come out of nowhere. I mean, they almost lost back in 2012, Kyler Murray's first year.
He goes back like
no, because I remember
like 8 years, 7 years.
I mean, like, Plano Senior almost snuck on him, was a 2-point conversion away from beating Allen in Eagle Stadium back in Kyler Murray's first year quarterback, and that was a Plano team that, I mean, nobody would have seen that coming. So, I mean, these challenges can happen out of the blue.
It's a matter of timing, too, though, right? Because if last year's Plano East team, if that whole crop is juniors and they have that team this year against an Allen team that's completely reloading, maybe that goes differently. But just looking around the rest of the district, I don't see anybody that's going to really challenge them, at least you know, as of right now.
Now those non-district games, I mean, they get Cedar Hill to start, and that game could be a little tricky. So, but we'll see. Let's see who else we haven't talked about.
What's Prosper got going on?
Yeah, what's Prosper got going on? So we can close this out with a look at Prosper. I'm not doubting Prosper anymore.
Nope.
That is my mission statement for the 2019-2020 school year. I am not doubting Prosper in any capacity. I mean, they made the playoffs in every standings-based sport last year, all 8 of them. They were them and Allen were basically 1A and 1B as far as the best programs in District 9-6A. Now, to be fair, though, the football team does have some pretty key contributors to replace. They're going to have a new quarterback. Keegan Shoemaker has moved on. Going to have a new running back because Wayne Anderson has moved on, and they're going to have a new lead receiver. Justine Clark has graduated as well. And just looking at those 3 specifically and their production last year, at least as far as finding the end zone, Shoemaker was responsible for 23 of their 24 passing touchdowns. Anderson was responsible of 18 of their 32 rushing touchdowns, and Clark was responsible for 14 of their 24 receiving touchdowns. So those 3 guys, I mean, if basically the odds say if Prosper ever found the end zone, those 3 are more than likely going to be in on it. So as far as who's kind of in line to take over, Jackson Berry, who was a quarterback that saw some time last year. Now, he was used a lot of times when they got kind of near the goal line. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. He was
the Belldozer back in the day.
Yeah, so he's it stands to reason that his role will expand quite a bit this coming season. Their number 2 running back, JT Lane's back. He had 5 touchdowns last season, and then Hayden Metcalf, who was he only had said Clark was. I mean, Justin Clark had 14 touchdowns, and the next highest was Hayden Metcalf with 3. But Hayden Metcalf, of those receptions that he did have, he had 34 catches. He made the most of them. He had 17 yards per catch last season.
They always have a big play guy like that because it was shout out to Everett Jefferson back in the day.
Yeah,
they always had that one guy that's going to make those big plays, and they always have a solid line. That line last year was pretty good.
Oh yeah, they had quite a few guys that were like that average, more than 14 yards per catch last season. So it's going to be a little bit of a different look from Prosper. They still have Jake Majors up front, one of the top offensive linemen in the area. Yep, UT commit. And then their defense, guys like Aiden Ciano, who was the defensive newcomer of the year last year out of 9-6A. Defensive lineman Will Prendergast. That's a tough last name to pronounce. And then Josh Graham in the secondary. I mean, I don't know if they'll tie for second like they did last year, but at the same time, I'm not doubting them as far as being a fixture in the playoffs. They've shown that they acclimate just fine to the level of competition. You would expect that they're still going to be very formidable one way or another.
Yeah, it's just really strange because I don't want to say, I mean, I don't doubt them anymore either. They made the postseason in all 8 sports, but football, if you want to use quote unquote weaker, I guess. Even though where they finished, I feel like that transition was a little harder. That was a little more of a task to try to keep up with some of those programs, and then they're going to lose a ton. But I think the theme of this entire podcast and of this whole district is that underneath Allen, like, none of us really have any idea what any of these teams are going to be.
We're just kind of going off of just precedent because they got so many question marks as well.
What are any of these teams going to be? They're all going to be completely different, it feels like. I don't think anybody really carries over hardly anything. So it's going to be a trip for sure.
Yeah, this should be a fun district with so much uncertainty around 9-6A, and that is a look at kind of where these schools are at, and that'll conclude this episode of the podcast, and that'll conclude our spring football roundup series. We will pick things up on Thursday, relaunching our school year in review series, put a nice little bow on what all of our markets accomplished throughout the 2018-19 school year, and folks, hey, keep enjoying your week, and we will talk to y'all later.